Welcome to week 2 of our class called The Language of Lamentations. We'll be doing a lot of word studies, but we'll be looking at the meaning of the passages here in the book of Lamentations. 5 chapters, and today, how lonely sits the city. And I kept thinking about what a downer all these passages are in Lamentations. Hence, I mean, they are laments. Jeremiah was the weeping prophet, and this is a sad time in Israel's history. They are being taken over by the Babylonians. They're going to be taken into captivity. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and the people just are not listening to Jeremiah. They are not listening to the Lord, and it is a sad, sad time. And so I'm going to make sure that we have we have several tonight just interspersed to look at the different meanings of words and things like that. But I will make sure that at the end of each lesson, we have something positive to leave with. And there are lots of positives, even as we look at the negatives, because we realize that we are now the covenant people. Zion is waiting for us, the eternal Zion, the heavenly Zion. We've got plenty to learn even from these negative passages, and all this is for our learning, of course. So we are, this is the first lesson where we will dive into the actual text of Lamentations. We looked at one verse last week just so I could show you how we would proceed. We did that kind of with a text in Jeremiah, but tonight we will take a close look at the first 11 verses of this book. For the online classes, I will be putting up this slide every week just to give credit to those that I might be mentioning, or some of the ideas that I get from the different commentaries there at the bottom. Bible Gateway is what I'm using to grab the ESV, the New American Standard Bible text, and the Hebrew text, the Westminster Leningrad Codex. All right, so let's just dive right in. We will go to Lamentations chapter 1, verse 1. And as I mentioned last week, we will read the text from the New American Standard. I will make some comments about different words. You can see that I am going to talk about the word lonely, already highlighted. I have kept the initial consonant of the verse down in the Hebrew highlighted. If you'll recall, this is an acrostic, chapter 1, 2, and 4. There are 22 verses, 22 consonants in the Hebrew alphabet, and each verse uses the first verse uses the first letter, second verse, second letter, third verse, third letter, etc. In chapter 3, we have 3 verses that start with Aleph, 3 that start with Beit, 3 that start with Gimel, 3 that start with Dalet, all the way through the alphabet, through the 66 verses. And then chapter 5, there's no acrostic at all. And so we talked about it some last week, but we'll talk about it again once we get to chapter 5. All right. So, all right. I paused my recording just for a moment because I wanted to check something, and everything is all set and good. So how lonely sits the city that once had many people. She has become like a widow who was once great among the nations. She who was a princess among the provinces has become a forced laborer. All right, so let's take a look at this word lonely. It really has at its, I mean, that's exactly what it means, but the idea of being abandoned or secluded in solitary, so to speak. And sometimes it's exactly as it is here. We would expect it to be a negative thing. It used to have a lot of people. The city did. Jerusalem is being talked about here. And now it's all lonely. The people are gone. She's like a widow now. The city is just abandoned. But sometimes this idea of being secluded and the idea of being in solitary is the idea of safety. And that's how this word is used in Psalm 4, verses 6 through 8. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety, in solitude, in solitary, so to speak. And so the word is used that way as well. And just context lets us know Hebrew poetry uses a lot of parallelism. And so it's in peace that I'm going to lie down and sleep, and then I'm going to dwell in safety. We're going to see a lot about this idea of dwelling in today's lesson. So first, back to our text here, let's look at the word for forced laborer. This is not an unusual word here in the Old Testament. Chain gang, a prison group would be another way to kind of look at this. Forced labor being this group of people, or a a gathering of people that's being forced to do work. We find this in Isaiah 31, 8 and 9. And the Assyrian shall fall by a sword, not of man, and a sword not of man shall devour him. And he shall flee from the sword, and his young men shall be put to forced labor. His rock shall pass away in terror, and his officers desert the standard in panic. Declares the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and whose furnace is in Jerusalem. All right, so notice I've got several other words highlighted. We won't be going to other texts, but I do want to note these words. The idea of Jerusalem being a widow. It's the idea, widows and orphans are talked about a lot in scripture because these were the groups of people most at risk. These were the people who needed help. And Jesus pointed out more than once that we need to be taking care of people in need. And in that culture, widows and orphans were the ones with the most needs, the most distress if they were not taken care of, if they were left without parents, left without a husband. That was a big giant deal in these cultures, and still is in some places around the world. It's a big deal here as well, but people can get along. Women can take care of themselves if they need to. Children have outlets, but still orphans. That's one of the toughest things in our culture still. Well, Jerusalem has become like a widow. She was once great among the nations. The idea there for great is chief. Number one, the head. Once the head, once the chief among the nations. And now that has gone away. The idea of the nations is oftentimes talked about in Scripture. Paul was the apostle to the nations, the Gentiles. The Gentiles just meant the world out there, besides the Jewish world. And so the nations, Jesus came to save the nations. Jesus came to seek and save the lost from wherever someone might be. And so Jerusalem was great. Jerusalem was chief. Jerusalem was the head among the nations. She who was a princess, by the word, the same word used for Sarah back in Genesis. She who was a princess, the city, Jerusalem, a princess among the provinces. This princess has become a forced laborer. It gives us a vivid picture of what has happened here. Jerusalem is nothing now. How lonely sits the city that once had many people. All right. Verse 2. She weeps bitterly in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. She has no one to comfort her among all her lovers. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. So not only has the city been abandoned, but abandoned emotionally, abandoned as far as support, abandoned as far as comfort. The people who used to care about the princess don't care so much for the forced laborer. Now, I do want you to notice something about the weeps bitterly. We've talked about this in some other classes, and I may have mentioned it last week. But if you notice, these two words, this one has a prefix on it, but besides that, these first two words of the sentence are exactly the same, some different vowel markings, but it's she weeps with great weeping. She weeps with weeping in the night. She is weeping with weeping in the night, is how the Hebrew would read. Well, that's not very smooth in English. And this is common in the Hebrew. You have the verb and the adverb, or a verb and a noun. They have the exact same root. And it means that we have an intensification of what's going on here. So weeping bitterly, that is a great translation. Weeping greatly would be fine. But the idea of intense weeping is the idea. And bitterly is the way that we typically say that in English. But it's weeps with weeping in the night. And then I just highlighted the word tears as well. And we just see that this is really serious business. The language itself lends itself for us to know that this is a big deal. She's not just feeling a little bit bad. This is devastating. Jerusalem, is in despair. Jeremiah 22, 8 to 10 uses the same idea. And many nations will pass by this city. This is when Jeremiah is prophesying it. Many nations will pass by this city, and every man will say to his neighbor, "Why has the Lord dealt thus with this great city?" And they will answer, "Because they have forsaken the covenant of the Lord their God and worshiped other gods and served them." Weep not for him who is dead, nor grieve for him, but weep bitterly. Weep with weeping for him who goes away, for he shall return no more to see his native land. All right, so Jerusalem is in a place, a time of distress, weeps bitterly, tears on her cheeks. Notice there's no one to comfort among all those who used to love her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They've become her enemies. This idea of dealing treacherously is forsaking the faith, forsaking the loyalty, forsaking what they should have been doing. All her friends should have been faithful to her. Her lovers should have been faithful to her. They should have comforted her. They should have dealt faithfully. But this is the opposite of that. This is dealing treacherously. This is being faithless or without loyalty, is the idea. And hence, they have become her enemies. Jeremiah 3:19 and 20 says, "I said, how would I set you among my sons and give you a pleasant land, a heritage most beautiful of all nations? And I thought you would call me my father and would not turn from following me. Surely as a treacherous wife leaves her husband, so have you been treacherous to me, O house of Israel, declares the Lord." People abandoned Jerusalem because of Jerusalem abandoned the Lord. Jerusalem, the people of Israel, God's people, were unfaithful. They were not loyal. They were treacherous, just like someone who goes off and is unfaithful to their spouse. So have you been treacherous to me, O house of Israel, declares the Lord. All right, verse 3 of Lamentations chapter 1. Judah has gone into exile out of affliction. and harsh servitude. She lives among the nations, but she has not found a resting place. All those who pursued her have overtaken her in the midst of distress. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this idea of resting place and this idea of living or dwelling. This is huge in Scripture. God wants us to realize that we have a resting place in Christ. And at the same time we have the resting place in Christ, we are to live as aliens. We are to realize this is not our final dwelling place. This is not our home. Our citizenship is not here. Our citizenship is in heaven. And so, same with God's people. The people of Jerusalem live among they have found their dwelling place elsewhere and therefore have not found a resting place. That's not where the real rest is. The New Testament talks about this rest. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." The only place where there is real rest, the only place where it's appropriate to dwell, is in Jesus Christ. Now, this, of course, was physical and this was real. The people had been taken off into captivity. They were living among the nations. They were living in Babylon, in old Assyria, and scattered about, but had not found a resting place. Psalm 132 talks about God's. For the Lord has chosen Zion, for he has desired it for his dwelling place. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it. I will abundantly bless her provisions. I will satisfy her poor with bread. Her priests I will clothe with salvation, and her saints will shout for joy. There I will make a horn to sprout for David. I have prepared a lamp for my anointed. His enemies I will clothe with shame, but on him his crown will shine. And so when we get to the time of Christ and beyond, when we get to now, this is now spiritual. And God is dwelling in Zion. He is dwelling in his temple. He is dwelling in his holy city. And his holy city, his temple, is the church, Christians. We're going to look at that in a little bit. One of the Corinthian passages that talk about how we are the temple of the living God. All right, so Judah has gone into exile out of affliction and harsh servitude. She lives among the nations, but she has not found a resting place. All those who pursued her have overtaken her in the midst of distress. This is distress in a very intensive way. The straits, kind of like being in the sea and being in distress, feeling like you might drown. We're going to see some of this language, and we're not going to actually turn to Jonah during this lesson, but we are going to note the language and the straits or the terrors of Sheol, of the death, causing distress. And we see this, I'll go ahead and turn there now. Psalm 116, verses 1 through 4. I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my pleas for mercy, because he inclined his ear to me. Therefore, I will call on him as long as I live. And then in 3 and 4, well, even in 1 and 2, we get a feel, but especially 3, for the book of Jonah, when he has been cast out of the ship and he's sinking, and before the large fish takes him in, so to speak, he is in distress there at the bottom of the sea, or as he's sinking. The snares of death encompassed me, the pangs, and it's the same word, the straits of Sheol, the distress of Sheol or of death laid hold on me. I suffered distress and anguish. Then I called on the name of the Lord. O Lord, I pray, deliver my soul. This is us spiritually before we come to Christ, before we confess who Jesus is and repent and get baptized into his name. This is us. And we call out to the Lord. Deliver, save, liberate. Deliverance is in the Lord. All right, verse 4 of Lamentations chapter 1, moving right along here. The roads of Zion are in mourning because no one comes to an appointed feast. All her gates are deserted, her priests groan, her virgins are worried. And as for herself, you can see the italics there. The New American Standard does a great job of letting us know when they add a word in for clarity. As for Zion herself, it is bitter for her. It's bitter for Zion. It's bitter for the physical Jerusalem, the physical Zion. The priests are groaning, the virgins are worried. It's a distressed time. I do want to note the word Zion, just because we will have that as we move through. Just another word for God's place, another name for Jerusalem. Of course, all these things shift to a spiritual meaning when we get to the time of the church, the New Testament, the time we're in now. I also want to note the word road, the first word there highlighted. Derek is the word in Hebrew, and it means road or way. And it doesn't just necessarily mean a physical way to get from point A to point B. It could be the way that one is living, the way that one is behaving. And same in the New Testament, the Greek word for road or way describes all these different things as well: physical, mental, emotional, the path that we are on as far as the spiritual path, a road to destruction or a way to heaven. These are used kind of interchangeably with the Hebrew word and the Greek word. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. It could have been translated, I'm the road. I'm the road to salvation, but way obviously makes more sense here, and it's what we're used to. But I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If it said road, I am the road and the truth and the life. No one travels to the Father except through me. Obviously, the way that it's worded, we all like, and I think it's the way it should be. But that's what the word means. And the road to Zion, the roads leading to Zion. Well, we find out from a spiritual standpoint, it's Christ. Christ is the only way to the Father, the only way to spiritual Jerusalem, the only way to be in the body of Jesus Christ. Obviously, it's his body, so he is the way to it. All right, verse 5. Her adversaries have become her masters. Her enemies are secure. For the Lord has caused her grief because of the multitude of her wrongdoings. Her little ones have gone away as captives led by the enemy. All right, so adversaries and enemy, you can see that those are the same word. There's a suffix on the first one there on the top line in the light blue. You don't have to know the Hebrew letters to see that there's a little bit more in the top one than the bottom one, but those are exactly the same words. And I did just want to point out that the other word for enemies in the second line in the English, the orange one, it is a different word. And there are several different words for enemies, just like we have enemy and adversary. Um, we have different words for these kinds of things as well. Typically, I will highlight the personal name for God, Yahweh, Jehovah, and it's highlighted in our English text and at the bottom. The word for wrongdoings here is transgressions, the idea of just crossing the line. And they are great wrongdoings, great transgressions. And the way the ES or the New American Standard puts it, the multitude of her wrongdoings. That's exactly right. They are just beyond count. Just a note on the little ones have gone away. The have gone away, the verb there is walking to and fro. But this is how, well, you could say her little ones are scattered. Her little ones uh, don't have direction anymore, but her little ones have gone away. They are gone. They are captives. The next line gives us the hint there, as captives led by the enemy, they have been taken away. And I think that's totally appropriate there. The idea of being led by the enemy, I do want to notice what's in the yellow at the very bottom, right down here. This is the word for face. So they have gone away in the face of the enemy. They have gone away and they are before the enemy. As captives before the enemy would be even more literal, or in the face of the enemy, to be super literal. But when you talk about the face in the Hebrew language, it's being before. You want the face of the Lord, his countenance to be upon you. You want his face toward you. And that means he is before you, that he is engaged with you. We use a similar expression in the negative. If someone turns their back on someone, um, they're not being loyal anymore. They have abandoned someone. That's the idea. This is just in the positive side. If the face is toward you, that's good. The person's being loyal, they're being engaged, they're blessing. But if the Lord's face is turned away from you, if his back is toward you, very, very negative thing. Jesus uses this language. This helps us to understand some of the passages in the New Testament. He's quoting the Old Testament here. What then did you go out to see? This is talking about John the Baptist. A man dressed in soft clothing? Behold, those who wear soft clothing are in the king's houses. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, and I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is he of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. Before your face and before you, they're not the same words, obviously. Face is part of the first line, but it means exactly the same thing. I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. All right, let's move on to verse 6. All of her splendor is gone from the daughter of Zion. Her leaders have become like deer that have found no pasture, and they have fled without strength from the pursuer. All right, just here, I just want to notice the actual text here. The leaders are gone. I mean, Jerusalem is just abandoned. Her splendor is gone. Just everything is falling apart, and we're just only in verse 6, right? I mean, we got it in verse 1. Um, the city is abandoned. And here we learn about the leaders. The leaders have become like deer. They can't find any pasture, so they are just fleeing. They are just running, and they haven't been nourished, so they don't have strength. They flee without strength from the pursuer. The idea of being without strength is a common theme in the Old Testament as well. When a country is defeated, they are without strength. It's not the same as without. It's not the same as being in shame, as we looked at last quarter. But the idea of being without strength is to be in a place that's undesirable, a place that is not good. And so they have fled without strength from the pursuers. All right, verse 7. In the days of her affliction and homelessness, Jerusalem remembers all her treasures that were hers since the days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the adversary, and no one helped her. The adversary saw her. They laughed at her ruin. Typically in Hebrew, the main verb is the beginning of the sentence, and we have that here, the idea of remembering. That is the first word in the Hebrew sentence, putting the introductory prepositional phrase at the beginning of this verse is good in English. It makes it read well. But the idea would be here, remember. That would be the first word the Jews would hear as this passage was read. Remembers Jerusalem, all her treasures. When did she remember all her treasures? In the days of her affliction and homelessness. These treasures that were hers since the days of old. And so remember would be the first word there. This lesson, you may be listening to this 2 years or 3 years or 2 weeks later, but today is September 11th, 2024, and we remember what happened on September 11th, on back over 20 years ago now. And we remember because it's important to remember what took place. And remembering is very, very important. In fact, the word has, it's part of the root is, and you can see it in memorial, you can see the MEM. A memorial is a remembrance. And we do that every Lord's Day. We partake of the Lord's Supper. We remember the Lord. Remember is a very important word in the Bible, Old and New Testament. Here's what we read in 1 Corinthians 11, 23 to 26. For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way also he took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Remember me. That's what Jesus wants. Every Lord's Day, when we partake of the bread and the cup, when we eat the bread and drink the fruit of the vine, we are to remember him in a special way. It's a time of remembrance. It's a time of memorial. And this is to be done every Lord's Day. If you are one who worships at a place that does not participate in the body and blood of Christ each Sunday, every Lord's Day, I encourage you to search for a place. If you're in Columbus, you can come to our congregation, Columbus, Ohio. But I encourage you to find a place where communion, the Lord's Supper, is taken very, very seriously. All right, verse 8 of Lamentations 1. Jerusalem sinned greatly. Therefore, she has become an object of ridicule. All who honored her despise her, because they have seen her nakedness. Even she herself groans and turns away. Even Jerusalem can't stand it anymore. Even Jerusalem is turning. I love the personification. I think it's a really great way to communicate. All right, so let's look at sinned greatly. We saw this earlier in this lesson, but I just want to point it out once again. Notice that these words are exactly the same. This one has a suffix. So it's she sinned with sinning. But we don't say it that way in English. And what the Hebrew is getting at is an intensification. So wept bitterly is appropriate. Sinned greatly is appropriate. These are good translations of the Hebrew. We don't say sinned with sinning, and we don't say she wept with weeping. That's just not how we express that in English. And so good translations here. Jerusalem sinned greatly. Now, someone hearing this being read in synagogue would have recognized that the words are exactly the same. And they would have realized, oh, wow, I mean, this is big time intense. And so that's what we want to get across in the English. Sinned greatly. Sinned amazingly, but not in a good way, right? And because of that, she's become an object of ridicule. Those who used to honor her, those who were loyal to her, are now treacherous. Those who were friends or lovers are now enemies. Those who honored her despise her. Everything has shifted. Now, the idea with despising is to take lightly, not take seriously. Those who used to consider her heavy and weighty and important now consider her light and frivolous and not even worth noticing. Despising, turning their head, walking by. Those who honored her despise her. We talked a lot about that word at the beginning of our shame class. This is one of the meanings of shame. If someone shames another, they're not taking them seriously anymore. There's no gravity or weight to it anymore. It's light and frivolous, and we're just not going to deal with this individual. They despise the individual. And here, another word for shame is used. I mean, it's the word for nakedness, but parallel with shame, because they have seen her nakedness. This takes us all the way back to Genesis when Adam and Eve sinned. They were ashamed once they had sinned, and they knew they were naked, and they wanted to cover up. All right. Verse 9, her uncleanness was in her garment's seams. Um, Literally here, her uncleanness in her skirts. She did not think of her future. So she has fallen in an astonishing way. She has no comforter. See, Lord, my affliction, for the enemy has honored himself, not me. The enemy is not, the enemy is my enemy now. The enemy is no friend anymore. God wants us to be comforted. And it's actually a verb here in the Hebrew. She has no one to comfort her. She has no one comforting her. She has no comforter. All right. Oh, I did want to point out the green there, that's the word for remember. But obviously, in this context, it can mean think as well. She did not remember her future. That would be a really weird way to put it in English. The Hebrew, obviously, they were used to that word being used that way. She did not think of her future. She was not considering that. She was not remembering that maybe I should contemplate what's going to happen in the future if I behave this way. No, she was unclean. She was impure. Jerusalem was terrible. God's people were they were totally disloyal to God. They were transgressing. They were doing wrong. So she has fallen in an astonishing way. The word there is wonder, in a way that just causes someone to be amazed or astonished or full of wonder. But again, not in a positive way. It's just so unbelievable that it draws attention. She has fallen in an astonishing way. She has no comforter. And then we get a little quote: See, Lord, my affliction, for the enemy has honored himself. Verse 10, the adversary has stretched out his hand over all her precious things. For she has seen the nations enter her sanctuary, the ones whom you commanded that they were not to enter your congregation. We're going to look at this in just a little bit. We're going to read verse 11 first. But this is just appalling to the Jews, or it should have been appalling to the Jews who would have read this later. The adversary, the enemy, has control over everything that was great, everything that was precious, everything that had value. For she has seen the nations enter her sanctuary. Sanctuary is the physical place. The word has the same root as the word for holy or set apart. So this place that should have been private, this place that should have been God's and God's alone, the nations have come on in. And God's people didn't care. They've come in and taken over. They've come into the holy place. It's like a man who doesn't belong with a woman being in the privates of the woman. It's like that. And that's how God feels it. That's how God parallels it. You were my bride, and you have been unfaithful. That's what's happening here. The ones whom you commanded that they were not to enter your congregation. They shouldn't have been in the midst of the people. They shouldn't have been in the assembly. They shouldn't have been in the sanctuary. And here they are, right in the midst of God's people, God's holy place. We are now the temple of the living God. So this gives us insight into how important it is for a Christian to stay away from unholy things, for a Christian to not allow worldly things in. They shouldn't be in our bodies. They shouldn't be in our presence. They shouldn't be in our minds. And that's tough in today's culture. It's rough. We are bombarded with worldly things. It's tough to keep the world out. All right, verse 11. All her people groan, seeking bread. They have given their treasures for food to restore their lives. See, Lord, and look, for I'm despised. It's just, how heavy can the heart get? Terrible, terrible, terrible situation. So there are several different passages we could look at concerning our being the temple of the living God, our being the sanctuary, our being the congregation. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 3:16, 1 Corinthians 6:19, and 2 Corinthians 6:16 particularly, but we'll look at 14 through 18. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? How could Jerusalem let these things into the sanctuary? Back to 2 Corinthians 6. For we are the temple of the living God, as God said, I will make my dwelling among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore go out from their midst and be separate from them, says the Lord, and touch no unclean thing. Then I will welcome you, and I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty. So when we look at the book of Lamentations and we see what God's people did, spitting in God's face, basically, well, we are called to recognize that when we allow uncleanness into our lives, impurity, when we allow the world in, well, what does God want to do? He wants to shove us all into Babylonian captivity. That would be what he wants to do. But because of his grace and his mercy, he has given us Christ, and Christ pays the price for these sins. But we sure don't want to sin more so grace may abound. We want to be pure. We want to be holy. We must strive to be the people that God wants us to be. All right, so let's read our verses straight through from the ESV, just to give us a different version. We'll do this each week. Verses 1 through 11 of Lamentations chapter 1. And then we will read a final passage that is a passage of hope. All right, so Lamentations 1, 1 through 11. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she who was great among the nations, she who was a princess among the provinces, has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile because of affliction and hard servitude. She dwells now among the nations, but finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for none come to the festival. All her gates are desolate, her priests groan, her virgins have been afflicted, and she herself suffers bitterly. Her foes have become the head, her enemies prosper, because the Lord has afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone away captives before the foe. From the daughter of Zion and her majesty, all her majesty has departed. Her princes have become like deer that find no pasture. They fled without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembers in the days of her affliction and wandering all the precious things that were hers from days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the foe and there was none to help her. Her foes gloated over her. They mocked at her downfall. Jerusalem sinned grievously. Therefore she became filthy. All who honored her despise her, for they have seen her nakedness. She herself groans and turns her face away. Her uncleanness was in her skirts. She took no thought of her future. Therefore her fall is terrible. She has no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. The enemy has stretched out his hands over all her precious things. For she has seen the nations enter her sanctuary, those whom you forbade to enter your congregation. All her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, and see, for I am despised. All right, we will finish chapter 1 next week. We will look at verses 12 to 22, the last 11 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, each verse beginning. All right, as we close today, Hebrews 12, 22 to 24. But you have come to Mount Zion, spiritual Zion, of course. You have come to Mount Zion and the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. Where have we come? He's talking to Christians. We've come to this heavenly dwelling and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect. And we have come to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. All right. Next week, is any sorrow like my sorrow? Lamentations 1, verses 12 to 22. May the Lord bless us and keep us in Jesus Christ and as we study his great word.